What's up, everyone? This is Jesse with 44 Astro. This will be my first astrology video. It's more of how to look up a natal chart for an individual so you can find the most prominent signs in your natal chart and what planets are most activated. It's just going to be a simple tutorial for those who don't know. Many of you probably do, but for anybody that doesn't know, and I'm going to try to break down a little bit on how the astrology determines what's most important in your chart, and I'll just use my natal chart as an example. First, you want to go to Google, type in birth chart calculator. I already have it there, so birth chart calculator. You're going to need three things. You're going to need to know where you were born. You're going to need to know the date you were born, and you're also going to need to know what time you were born. And I mean within the minute if you can help it, because you're going to change the degrees. But within 15 minutes will give you probably a pretty good accuracy. You really want to know the time. If you don't know the time, ask your parents. If you can't ask your parents or they don't know, you need to get your birth certificate, and you need to get the birth, if you're in the US, the birth certificate that you would get to get a passport. And that one will definitely have the time listed. In other countries, I don't know how y'all would go about that. I'm sure there is definitely a birth record for you. For me, you pick whichever one you want. Kathy Astrology has some basic explanations for stuff. Breaks down a little bit of stuff if you want some basic information. It's not the one I would use. It doesn't aspect the asteroids like it should, in my opinion. And I believe that specifically Chiron is extremely important. That's why it's the shape of a key. I always use astro charts simply because I don't need an explanation. So you would type in your name, city you were born, but any of these will give you your basic three signs and everything. And Chiron is rarely important in a person's chart. Well, that's not true. It can be, and in my chart it's extremely important. But mine's probably an extreme oddity, and I will show you why. Oh no, that's incorrect. What am I doing here? Probably just, I could have typed in just a random chart, probably helped too. So this is my natal chart. As you can see, I'm going to bring up a bigger one here in a second. Look at the massive amount of planets right here. I clearly have a stellium. I have most of my planets right here in Scorpio and Sagittarius. So clearly those two signs will be very important to me. And if you notice, I have a grand trine. I actually have a kite because I have sextiles on the end of it. So it makes the picture of a kite. You see, with the lines down it and everything. So I have a full kite, and the kite all tips to the point to Chiron. So Chiron is quite important in my chart. Not so much Gemini, though it does fall in Gemini, but my sixth house and Chiron is the wounded healer. So a lot of times in a natal chart, it'll have to do with health. So if this is conjunct your ascendant, depending on what sign it is, you can be a very sickly person. But not only that, you could also be on the other side of it. You could be super healthy because you're a hypochondriac. But health one way or another, or your health, or it'll be very important in your life to heal and then show others, or you already be crazy about health and you'll teach others. But it's always about teaching, because that's what Chiron was. Chiron is also what you would call the rainbow bridge. All the planets from the sun to Saturn are the individual planets, and they're going to be the most important on individual influence. Once you get to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, those are, because they have much longer orbits, right? Pluto's 280 years. Neptune, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a lot. And Uranus is like 84 years. So it's very long orbits. So they're generally involved with the collective of humanity. You'll see it patterns in all of humanity unfolding within those planets, those aspects. But they still do have an impact on the individual, because you can't see it in the overall collective if it's not happening in the individual. So it does play a role, and it does flavor things. Make no mistake about it. So, and you want to look at your orb on specific aspects. The ones that say 0 orb, which means 0 degrees, which means perfect aspect, these will be the most important. And makes no mistake, in my life, these two are definitely the most important. Communication about my healing, trust me, I do it. It's like speaking to large crowds. I do it. I will break that down. I'll probably, if I ever get the channel grown enough, I'll break down kind of what my journey is, has been, was, and why I speak to people about healing. But anyway, Venus conjunct Pluto, that was a very important one for me, And all these 1 orbs and 3 orbs, 4 orbs even, are pretty strong, right? You're going to feel them. Once you get down to like 8 orbs, they're not so strong. And I'm lucky in a sense. Don't get me wrong. I do feel the sun conjunct Saturn, and that's never the greatest of things, because the sun is your mission in life and how you're going to express yourself, and is our objective to be solar, right? It's our objective to project and to teach people. But Saturn, on the other hand, restricts that. But I'm lucky it's an 8 orb. But I do feel it in my life, make no mistake. So that even though it's an 8 orb, I do feel it. But it hasn't been as debilitating as it could be. Anyway, I'm just breaking it down. I'm just showing you some things. This is a stellium. It's a bunch of planets together. Conjunction, 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 conjunction. Some astrologer will tell you that it has to be in a specific sign. It's bogus. As long as the chain of conjunctions doesn't break, the chain of energy does not break. So therefore, it is a solid stellium, and it will stay a stellium. It's all about the energy and it being connected. As long as it's connected, it's a stellium. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down my ascendant. And the most outer planet will rule this. So in my case, it's going to be Uranus. And it also, Uranus also conjuncts my ascendant. Anyway, I was talking about the rainbow bridge for Chiron. Anyway, I was getting to the whole Saturn, the inner and outer planets. So Chiron plays a role for all of us, whether we like it or not, because it's the key. It's the rainbow bridge. It connects your individual consciousness, which is the inner planets, to the collective, the psychic consciousness, right? The Neptune consciousness, Uranus consciousness, Pluto consciousness, which is the expansive, which is the collective, right? So if you have it very important in your chart, your ability to connect to the other side is almost certainly going to be easier, and you're going to have to do it as part of your life. Also, having planets like the moon touch it help. And also, I do have that. Mercury and Uranus, they all touch it in an opposition, though, which means there was about a bit of balancing that had to be done within myself to be able to actually access what that brings to me. Anyway, I'm going to get to my natal chart, bring it up. I just want to kind of show y'all certain things, right? There's the kite, showing it to you. Points to Chiron. My MC, Mars is involved with it. Jupiter in the second house, but I'll explain some of that just to kind of break down my chart. I'm going to get to the bigger chart here. I did want to break. One day I'll explain midpoints. And if you had, so for example, that rainbow bridge, Chiron it's in between Saturn and Uranus. And Saturn and Uranus are opposite in a lot of ways. One's the past, one's the future. Uranus being the future, Saturn being the past. So in midpoints, if you look at 2 planets, right? So for example, I have this planet, the sun. Let's say I want to find the midpoint between the sun and Saturn. So what would happen? Sun and Saturn are basically touching. So where the sun's at, I would grab it and I would go all the way around this way. And then I would grab Saturn going all the way around this way. And wherever that point meets, right? That's the midpoint energy. And if you have a planet there in your natal chart, you will notice that, especially if you have Chiron in between Uranus and Saturn, then you're really going to have an easy time. I have it, like if I went with, for example, but it's a loose orb. So here's my ascendant at 22 degrees Sagittarius. You got Uranus here. So it's going around, you see. And you have Saturn over here. He's going around. And see, it almost meets halfway. But it would be a loose orb for me. And you also can track transits in your life with harmonic energy. That's what you call harmonics. One day, if I get to that point, I'll explain it to people. But anyway, this is just a basic video to kind of help people understand how to find out what's most important in your chart. For example, something that's going to be powerful is going to be a planet in the sign that it rules. So the sun in Leo would be very powerful. You're going to have a powerful sun. Mercury in Gemini or Virgo. Venus in Libra or Taurus, or the 7th house or the 2nd house. So with Virgo and Gemini for Mercury, also 3rd house and 6th house. Not just the sign, and if it's both, it's even more powerful. So where was that? So, and for Mars, you're going to look at Aries. So you're talking about in the 1st house or in Aries. Mars will be very, very strong. Or even in Scorpio. Some would argue in Scorpio. And it will be strong in Scorpio, but it's not going to be as strong as it is in Mars. Trust me on this. Pluto is Scorpio. Make no mistake. And if you really study the planets, you'll really start to see it and understand it. So then Jupiter would be Sagittarius. If you see Jupiter in Sagittarius or Jupiter in the ninth house, it's going to be very powerful, and you're going to want to look at that planet, see what else it's touching. For Saturn, you're looking at the 10th house or Capricorn. For the moon, you're looking at 4th house or Cancer. For Uranus, you're looking at the 11th house or Aquarius. Neptune, 12th house or Pisces. Pluto, you're looking at 8th house or Scorpio. Also, if you first, I'll give you an example of mine. I do have Pluto in Scorpio. So Pluto is very powerful in my chart specifically. He's right here in Scorpio. See, here's Scorpio. There's Pluto. So he's going to be something to reckon with in my chart. Now, I don't have a ton of aspects with him. He does have an aspect here, touching this, which is basically a square. Let me bring up my chart over here. It's a square with my Jupiter, and that's actually a perfect conjunction between Pluto and Venus. So I can have Pluto's power. Pluto can represent a lot of things in a chart. He can be a destroyer. He can be a rapist, a really bad person. He can be just an aspect of you needing power, needing to transform, to kill things within yourself, to grow. Pluto's very powerful. And with him being on Venus, it's all going to be material in a lot of ways, right? Or in your love, wanting to dominate relationships, things like that, or having a relationship that's very dominant. But if you look, Pluto doesn't have a lot in my natal chart here, if we can see it here. See, if you look, Pluto is opposition my north node. And that is basically it, other than right here, Venus conjunct, which is the perfect aspect I told you about, and then Jupiter square Pluto. Other than that, he doesn't have a lot. So even though he is in Scorpio, which doesn't make him powerful, he doesn't have a lot of aspects. But he still has to be reckoned with. So but because he's there, and I have a stellium going into Scorpio, the stellium does start in Scorpio, starts with the sun, right? My stellium goes from here, starts right here, and then we get 6 conjunctions going all the way down to my ascendant, right here. So this area is all conjunctions. Most of it's in Sagittarius, so I'm going to have a heavy concentration of energy in Sagittarius, which makes it very important in my chart. And the Lord of your ascendant, or who rules your ascendant, will rule your chart. That's why it's so important to know your ascendant, the time of birth. So when individuals like on YouTube are like, oh, this is the horoscope for Scorpio, only if you're Scorpio ascendant, right? Now, you can have a Scorpio ascendant, it makes sense, if you also have a Scorpio ascendant. You can get general energies in a horoscope, right? Like certain conjunctions and aspects with planets, especially the bigger planets, they're going to make sense to some extent. But if you want to know what aspect of your life it's going to affect, you need to know the houses. For example, first house is the house of self. It can also, that's like literally who you are. It can also be, it can be a lot of things. It could be like your physical health, but it's normally your physical self, your actual physical body. And certain planets there will determine kind of what you do as yourself and how you present yourself, all these things. Second house is like material. And in Vedic, it's also has to do with like teaching as well, but it's really your material wealth, not necessarily what you work, even though it can represent that. It's really about your material belongings, like what you have or what you gain in life or what you're getting in life. And it's good to have a benefic there. Like I have Jupiter there, which is a great planet to have there. Third house is communication. This is speaking. This is active intelligence. It's breaking things down, how you learn. So that's what I'm saying in a chart for a horoscope, if you don't know your ascendant and where your houses start. So when these transits are happening in these houses, you need to know what houses to know what part of your life these energies are going to aspecting. They can be like, oh, it's tough energies. Yeah, but you want to know where in your life. And that'll help you navigate it best. Fourth is the home life. That is your home. That's the mother. It's specifically your mother and your home. It can also be like your wife as well. Things like that, but it's very feminine energy. It's the moon. It can be your inner world as well. It's a psychic type house, intuition, these types of things. Fifth house is Leo, the sun, expressing how you express yourself in the world. It can be gambling. It can be speculative ventures. It could be fame. It could be like all these things, spotlight, self-expression, unique self-expression generally. Sixth house. So first house is yourself. Sixth house is specifically physical health. And I have Chiron there. I've had a lot of ailments in my life. And interestingly enough, I've had psychological ailments, even mental ailments, physical ailments, emotional ailments, and look what all it's touching it. The moon, which is my emotions, my inner world. Mercury, which is touching it, which is my thoughts, my active intelligence. Uranus, which is like my yearning to be unique and my individual freedom, and my nervous system. If you can see, I'm kind of high-strung individual. I talk really fast. I have a nervous system, right? So those are the types of things that it affected in my life, and it truly did. And I've been working my whole life to physically heal these things and get better. And it also has to do with my communication. That's one thing I'm doing with YouTube. I'm studying astrology is one of the things I'm communicating. Seventh house is your actual spouse. It's going to be your individual spouse. So, and one-on-one relationships specifically. So if you have, for example, I don't really have a heavy seventh house. I have a great personal relationship with my wife, 21 years. So I'm having nothing there. I guess I got lucky. It worked out pretty well for me. Eighth house is Scorpio. We're talking sex, the occult, inheritances, taking from the earth, investigations, very mysterious and psychic house. Eighth house, dark house. Ninth house, that's Sagittarius. I talk about travel, foreign languages, justice, the law, these types of things. That's all ninth house. Jupiter stuff. 10th house is Capricorn. It's what you do for work. It's the work that you have to have in your life. And I do have a 10th house. And this is where your midheaven will come in for everybody, be 9th or 10th house. Okay? This is going to be your work, what you do for work. So my MC has Mars on it, right? So that would suggest I'm doing something physical. But in my case, it has to do with physical, but not in the way you would think. It's more about my passion for it. And so anything that I would have that I want to do to succeed in life, I have to actually be passionate about it. I'm passionate about astrology. That's why I know so much about it. And it's part of my grand triangle. But I'm not going to necessarily get too heavy into all that. I will make individual videos for some of these things like stelliums, patterns, specific patterns like the kite, all these different. There's all kinds of different patterns that you can see in natal charts. That was the 10th house. That's your vocation. That's what you're going to do for work and the works that you have to complete in life. And your MC, it specifically will, if you have aspects and stuff touching your MC, it's going to give you an idea of what is best for you to do for work. 11th house is the collective. Everyone together, your whole social sphere, not individual relationships, your relationship with the collective, or your relationship in society, and then finding your role within society. So I have the sun there. I also have Saturn there. So it's like you fight with this aspect of like that can represent fame to an extent, right? Or at least a spotlight being on you, or wanting it, right? But with Saturn being there, it kind of restricts it. And I'll break down each planet at some point a little more as well. 12th house is loss. It is foreign lands. It is secret enemies. It's extreme intuition, psychic ability, expansiveness. Did I say loss? It can be being imprisoned. That's why when you see people with heavy 12th houses, like me, I have a heavy 12th house. Now, if I had Neptune there, or it was in Pisces, or it was really strong, even now, even with a heavy 12th house, I will not commit crimes. I will not break the law. If you have 12th house, because it represents loss in a lot of ways, and not knowing your boundaries, and not knowing, it's really about that house is really not knowing who you are, because you're trying to be expansive, and you kind of lose the whole aspect of the structure of the universe. It's more about complete open expansiveness. So it's not knowing your personal role in things. So loss is kind of part of it, because it's like losing the ego, dissolving yourself to become enlightened, right? That's the last house of the zodiac. It's Neptune, right? But we're living a material experience. So a lot of times that leads to just loss, and it can be loss of freedom. So if you have a heavy 12th house, I have a heavy 12th house, so I don't break the law. I do my best to follow the law straight up. I know a lot of law enforcement. I work with them. If you have heavy Pisces, like Neptune on your ascendant with like the 12th house, you may lose your freedom. Like if you look at Julian Assange, somebody mentioned him in one of the comments. I looked at his natal chart. He has Neptune on his ascendant, and he has a strong 12th house. So that means he has strong Pisces in his chart, and he has Scorpio and Sagittarius like me, but it's opposite, right? He had his moon and his moon in Scorpio is ascendant in Sagittarius, something like that, or sun in Sagittarius. I can't remember for sure. I think it's sun in Sagittarius, but it's opposite, which made him an investigator, and he investigated, but he lost his freedom for it. I mean, you can't make this up. It's right there in his natal chart. So for me to see what was strongest in my chart, I'm looking, and you would do the same. You would want to look for planets in their houses. I explained what all the houses are. You want to look for a planet in its house or in its sign, specifically its sign. There's also something called mutual reception. When you have an aspect with a planet in a planet, let me show you what I'm talking about here. So I have a mutual reception. See, it says Jupiter in Aquarius and Uranus and Sagittarius are in mutual reception. And if you look, Jupiter is touching Uranus right here with a sextile, and they're in each other's ruling sign. So because they're in each other's ruling sign and they're touching, especially in a harmonious way, it's called mutual reception. And because Jupiter rules my chart because I'm a Sagittarius ascendant, that makes him very powerful in my chart. And he's touching this big kite. He's actually a cornerstone of this big kite with that stellium. He's not in his house, but he's not in his sign, but he's touching a planet in a harmonious way with a sextile that is in the sign that he rules, you see? And as well, he's touching him, and that's also in his. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a harmonious aspect. It can be any aspect. But it would make them in mutual reception, which means they're connecting in some way, but they're in each other's sign of rulership, the planets. So that would make both of these strong. And Uranus even gets extra powerful. He's touching mutual reception with his sign Aquarius in my chart, but he's also conjunct my ascendant. So I basically see the world as a Aquarius. I see the world like Uranus. Okay. So the most powerful things in my chart would go in this order. Sagittarius clearly has the most planets. He has some important planets and aspects. He has my ascendant, which is very important. The three main ones you want to go off of when doing your natal chart, or when you're doing tarot readings or whatever you're looking at, is just your main three: your ascendant, your sun, and your moon. Okay. My ascendant and moon are the same, Sagittarius. So that also makes Sagittarius very powerful, and also Jupiter. Because Jupiter, like I said, rules my chart because my ascendant is in Sagittarius. The sun is very important in Scorpio. Your sun's important because it's Scorpio, but also because I have Pluto there, and that is his sign. He doesn't have a lot of aspects, though, so that's going to make him second, almost certainly, to this stellium, even though some of the stellium does go into Scorpio, so that makes it a little bit more powerful. But clearly, Sagittarius is the most powerful sign in my chart because of this stellium. Now, if you didn't have a stellium, you're going to want to look with houses with just like multiple planets, and you're going to see the number of aspects. Here's another thing. You want to know what planet has the most aspects. Now, the reason I use this specific astro charts, my moon and my MC are in 10 aspects. 10. So that's a lot of aspects. So that's going to make my moon strong. And where's my moon? Sagittarius. So it makes Sagittarius really strong for me again. My MC is in Libra, actually. But he is in 10 aspects. So that's what my life's work is going to be, what drives me. It's going to be a big part of my life. I mean, it is for everyone, right? But like for mine, because it's in my natal chart, it's going to be an important role in my life. Like it can't be mundane, right? Nothing I'm going to be able to do really is going to be able to get away from whatever this work is. And one day I'll explain it to you and you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I'm actually already involved in it. Not necessarily astrology. It's something else. And I've been doing it for a while. So basically, number one in my chart would be Sagittarius, clearly. You got the moon there, ascendant there. It's the two major things. Lots of aspects. The moon's most aspected in my entire chart. And the moon is very psychic. And it's in a psychic house because it's in the 12th house. And this is why I'm never going to say that I'm a psychic reader like a lot of these other things. But if you understand natal charts and you look at mine, you're going to see the fact that I have the way I think, my inner world, my psychic world, and then an electrifying planet, all touching touching the rainbow bridge that connects you to the other side, all in a psychic house, the house of Pisces. So it's like, the only way I can explain this, and the best way I ever read it when I was studying, is that I basically have an intent. I can't even fathom it most of the time. Like it's like not even knowing sometimes, and things just kind of happening. And then like almost knowing them, and then just kind of discovering them and then realizing you know in them. It's really weird. I don't hear voices or pretend to hear voices. The only voice I hear is my own voice in my head, like most of us. And things just kind of flow through me, and things in life always just kind of flow like that. But I believe I am definitely connected to whatever the universal energies are, and I know them well. But this is like having a antenna on my head, an electrified one, because you have Uranus touching Mercury and the moon in this conjunction here, and my ascendant, of course, which is myself. So it's like electrifying my inner psychic world and the way I think. So it's almost like, for me, a lot of times it's not even thinking, it's like automatic. It's hard to explain, it's just automatic. And many times it just comes out exactly how it's supposed to, without, like, I'll get into a situation, like I'm doing a speech or something like this, or I'm like an impromptu class that I had to teach or something, and then boom, it just comes out. And it comes out like it was supposed to, and I somehow, I'll just discover the things that I'm supposed to learn at that time to make the best lesson. It's hard to explain. It's really hard to fathom a lot of times. Yeah, cuckoo, right? I mean, you can't make this stuff up, though. I do have Jupiter in the second house, like I said. That's good for material wealth. Having the great benefic there, it's expansion. But having this here doesn't mean it's like, oh, you're going to get all this money. I mean, it definitely can support that, but you're going to have to work, okay? And that's what the second house a lot of time is. It's what you gain from your vocation. And if you look, it's also touching my MC, so it's definitely going to be from what I work for that I actually get. So if I work hard, I will gain a lot, but I have to work hard. You want to look at squares. These are important as far as motivation in your life, because tough aspects make it to where you have to balance them out or they'll ruin your life, kind of thing. I won't get into that too much. I'll break down the aspects on a whole different video. So first in my chart is Sagittarius, clear. It's the most powerful thing in the chart. Second is going to be Scorpio, because Pluto's there and my sun's there, and there's quite a bit of aspects happening here. Also, Saturn's a very powerful planet, and he's in Scorpio, but he does not like being in Scorpio. He hates Scorpio. And then third would have to be Aquarius, right? Simply because he's in mutual reception with Uranus, and Uranus is conjunct my ascendant. So for me, if I was to watch a third sign for tarot or anything else, I would watch Aquarius, because Aquarius is very powerful in my chart. I see the world like an Aquarius because it's conjunct my ascendant, and conjunctions are the most important thing in a chart. Look at your conjunctions. They're going to tell you a lot, especially conjunctions with your ascendant. First and foremost, your ascendant. That's how you're going to see the world. So if you want, if it's like, you're like, oh, well, I have this, and this, but I have this planet conjunct my ascendant, especially if it's in mutual reception with its if it's in its actual sign, conjunct your ascendant, that's cool. That makes it really powerful, of course, because, I mean, it's also your ascendant. But if it's, most of the time it won't be, but if it has any aspect with another planet, and that planet that it has an aspect with is in its ruling sign, then that's going to make it more powerful, especially conjunct your ascendant. But even if it's conjunct your sun, if it's conjunct your moon, and they have lots of aspects on them, and they're in mutual reception or in their sign or their house, then it's going to make them more powerful too. So if it was the moon that was conjunct your ascendant, that's going to be strong Cancer energy. So if that's in Cancer, or if it's in the fourth house, well, it can't be conjunct your ascendant in the fourth house. But for example, it's touching the fourth house, some planets in the fourth house, like you have a couple planets in the fourth house, like a strong conjunction there with like your sun or something like that, even though the moon's conjunct your ascendant, that's going to make that even more powerful. And you're going to want to focus on Cancer. There's all kinds of ways to see the planets and the aspects and the signs that are going to be most powerful. So for me, those would be the three most powerful. If I had to pick one next, mine's really bunched up, so mine's super bunched up, so it's really kind of straightforward. If it's not Scorpio, Sagittarius, or Aquarius, it would have to be Gemini. And I don't really have anything going on in Gemini. There's just a ton of aspects touching it. So it'd have to be Gemini. But anyway, that's basically a breakdown. The three things you need to know: where you were born, what time you were born, and the date you were born. If you do not know the time, you can do a chart without the time. Let me show you. But you're not going to know what aspects of your life it's really affecting. Okay? But you can get energies, but you're not going to know what part of your life it's affecting. And that's kind of my whole thing with really needing to know the sign or the time. It's just so important to know the time if you really want to get into it. And when you're looking at horoscopes, they're not going to tell you because they're going to want the views and the clicks and all that good stuff. But you really need to know the ascendant to figure out what houses those transits are hitting. So let's just say there should be, and I don't know on here. Unknown time. There we go. That's why I use this one, because it has unknown. Okay. And see, it's going to give you a chart, but there's no houses. See? No houses. Oh, it's such an ugly chart too. Ugh. It's an ugly chart, and it doesn't show Chiron, which to me is... Ugh. I don't know how about you wouldn't show Chiron. It shows Lilith, but not Chiron. It's like, ugh. Chiron is so important in a natal chart. It took me a long time to figure out a lot of things about myself. It's really important in my natal chart, but it's important overall. It has an exactly 50-year, which is unusual, exactly 50-year orbit around the sun, which is really cool. Okay, I'm trying to think of anything else that I can think of that would kind of give you an idea. Sun, ascendant, and moon is going to be the most important. What planet is most aspected will be important. So if, like, for me, it's most aspected, you would say, oh, well, Cancer, but because the moon is in Sag, in a stellium, and Jupiter being so strong, it's probably not, and the fact that I have nothing in my 4th house and nothing in Cancer, you're not going to want to mess with it, because the 4th house doesn't have anything, and neither does the sign. You need to have like some kind of extra with those for it to make sense. With the Jupiter, clearly I'm Sagittarius ascendant, Sagittarius moon, and it's touching the planet conjunct my ascendant in mutual reception, Uranus. So it makes it very strong, and that makes Aquarius strong too, because it is touching a planet that's in its ruling sign, and it's also in this big O pattern that is a grand trine, actually a kite. Okay, let me see if I can find one more thing. I'll show you all the sidereal if I still have it, but I may not still have it. I don't know if I have that chart anymore. I just want to give you an idea of a sidereal chart. Though I don't use sidereal chart, I do like one thing about it if I still have it, but I don't know if I do anymore. Oh, there it is. Oh, no, I don't want to put that there. No. Dadgummit. Okay, this is a sidereal chart. This puts things, so the information that you're all going to get, like for astrology, is all going to be in Western information. So it doesn't even matter what chart you use. It doesn't even matter, because, well, it does matter, because if you use this chart and you're going to try to alter the information that's made for what, because all the information they're going to try to use for this chart was developed for the Western system, so it's really not going to make as much sense. But these are going to be more accurate. If you look, Scorpio is the least amount of degrees, and Virgo is the biggest. That's all true as far as like actually looking in the sky and the size of the constellations. This is the Ophiuchus. I've mentioned it in other videos. This is the alignment with the center of the Milky Way galaxy. It's in between Scorpio and Sagittarius. That is the story. And if you look at me, I have a little set of planets here. That's also a little thing you would want to look at as far as psychic ability. And I will do a video on psychic ability and looking at it in the natal chart and what specific aspects you're going to be looking for. Eventually, if we ever get there. I didn't even want to make any astrology videos, but I wanted for people to understand how to look up their birth chart calculator, and also how to look on these examples, kind of give an idea of what's going to be most powerful in your chart. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you for being here. I hope this helped in some way. Please consider liking and subscribing and dropping a comment. We're trying to get to that 1,000. We're not even close, but I'm grateful to have the 161 that I have. So all of you that have subscribed and liked and commented, thank you. Yeah, hopefully this helps in some way.